You may have recently heard about the Bartrams bass, a new species of bass in Georgia and the Carolinas. They're not really new, and not really even that newly discovered, and that's part of why I wanted to create this video and talk a little bit about the Bartrams bass. I've seen several posts that I thought were a little bit misleading, or not the entire story, and I've had friends ask me about this bass species because they thought it was something that I already fished for. From the start, it's probably worth noting I'm not a fisheries biologist and don't consider myself an expert on the Bartrams bass. That said, I've fished for this type of fish for close to 30 years. I live in northeast Georgia, close to where they live in some of the streams. I spend time fishing for them pretty much every year. I'll spend some time out in the Chattooga River or some of the other streams in the area, targeting Bartrams bass. And I'm also an outdoor writer, and I've written about them over time. I've talked to the biologists in the area, and it's something that I've sort of tracked the diverse bass species in the state of Georgia, with particular interest in the Bartrams bass because they are up in my part of the state. So I wanted to just explain a little bit about them. So for starters, let's reconcile a new species of bass that I just said that I've been fishing for close to 30 years. When I started fishing for the what we now know are the Bartrams bass, they were lumped together with shoal bass. It was obvious that this was a native river bass species that looked different than a largemouth or a smallmouth or a spotted bass or some of the other fish. They were most similar to the shoal bass, and them and some other bass in streams in other parts of the state were all lumped with the shoal bass. But looking at it, the shoal bass in the Chattahoochee and Flint rivers grew larger than any of the other fish, and they really didn't look the same. And looking at it closer, the anglers and the biologists at some point, and I don't know exactly the time frame, it's been quite some time, started to lump these fish together with the red-eye bass, the Coosa red-eyes that are in the Coosa drainage. And then as they looked closer, they realized that some of the fish in other parts of the state and in other watersheds really were different than the Coosa red-eyes as well. There were differences in the coloration and subtle differences in their behavior, and biologists began looking at it closer and began to separate out some of these distinctive species in the different watersheds. And the Georgia Wildlife Resources Division has actually been calling the Bartrams bass, I would say it's probably close to 10 years. I know there's a blog on the department's website about the Bartrams bass that's from 2018, so that's 7 years ago. So at least that long, and I think a couple years longer than that, they have considered the Bartrams bass a separate species of bass. And what's happened now, by my best understanding, is that this has finally become an official designation, has gone through all of the scientific processes. And I don't know exactly what those processes are, but before federally or even internationally a species is considered a new species, there's a lot of, understandably, research and peer review and looking through all of the things to really see that it is a distinctive species. And the Bartrams bass has finally officially crossed that line, and that's where the stories recently have come about. We've long known there was a different species, but now it's official that the Bartrams bass is a different species of bass. Let's talk a little bit about the Bartrams bass as a species. We'll start with their range. They're located in the Savannah River drainage above the fall line, and that range is dramatically smaller than the native range in terms of where you're really going to find the fish. And there's a couple of factors that contribute to that. One is the establishment of reservoirs on the Savannah River and a couple of the tributaries. They're a native river species, and they do better in the river habitat, and that reduced the numbers and the places where you find them somewhat significantly, and moved them further up the watershed. But probably an even larger factor has been the introduction of non-native spotted bass to the Savannah River system. As the spotted bass have become more established in the lakes and then moving up some of the tributary rivers, they have either displaced the smaller and less aggressive Bartrams bass, or they've hybridized with them, reducing the number of pure fish in the streams. So you really have to go up some of the tributaries a little ways, a little bit higher up into the streams to find good populations of Bartrams bass, and crunching them even a little more as you work your way up the streams further. You start getting into the mountains, and the streams get colder, and you start getting into trout habitat. So there's kind of a narrow band where they're found, but in places they're still really good fishable populations, and there's more recognition of the importance of not moving fish species outside of their native range than used to be the case. So hopefully the Bartrams bass we have continue to remain the prevalent species, or even the only black bass species in some of the places where that's still the case now. Compared to a largemouth or smallmouth bass, the Bartrams are relatively small bass. They range from 5 inches to 16 inches is about the top end. Anything more than about 10 inches is a pretty good fish, and like a 12-inch fish would be kind of considered a trophy, I guess. It's not something that you go after with the big fish. In terms of their coloration and markings, they're less green than a largemouth and less brown or bronze than a smallmouth. I guess kind of in between those two, and the markings are a little bit more like a smallmouth than a largemouth or a spot. It doesn't have they don't have that distinct horizontal band that goes down the body, but they're a little different than a smallmouth also. There's just a different sort of a pattern. They have very clear markings most of the time, very distinct darker markings and beautiful coloration, and they normally have yellow or orange tails. There's a habitat, the Bartrams like a combination of rock and moderate current. But what I found is if I'm fishing in a big deep pool, the Bartrams are usually going to be either at the head of the pool or the tail of the pool where you have some current. They're not usually going to be in the deepest, slowest part of the pool. They're going to be where there's some moving water. On the other hand, if I'm fishing a shallow shoal where the water is moving along really well, then I'm going to look for them in the spots that are just a little bit deeper and maybe a little bit of an eddy. They really like to sit in an ambush position behind a rock or little cut in the bank where there's current right there, but they're not having to fight the current directly, where they can pop out. Fishing for the Bartrams, I'm usually wading and carrying light spinning tackle, and the common denominator of the lures I'm going to fish with is that they're going to be small. The Bartrams feed on crawfish and small minnows, aquatic insects, what you would expect from a stream-oriented sort of fish, and the small topwater lures, minnow-style baits, crankbaits, and little soft plastics like a finesse worm or a soft plastic crawfish work really well for the Bartram's bass. My go-to bait that I'm usually going to start the day with is a Rebel Crick Hopper, which is a cricket or grasshopper imitation, as you might expect by the name, that'll twitch on the surface. And if I can get them to come up and eat on the top, then that's what I want to do. And it looks just like a displaced aquatic or terrestrial insect. If they don't come up to the top, I might use a Rebel crawfish or a little minnow bait, like a track down ghost minnow, and then again, some type of a soft plastic is an alternative. Fly fishing for the Bartrams is also really popular, and something like a little popping bug or a sneaky Pete is a great bet, again, for calling them up to the top. Any type of a hopper pattern, and then beyond that, the most effective flies are going to be small streamer patterns that would suggest a minnow or a crawfish. A black or olive woolly bugger is probably pretty tough to beat, as it is for a lot of things. However you choose to go after them, the Bartram's bass are some of my absolute favorite fish to catch. Partly because they're close to home, and partly because they're a great species to go after by fishing on foot.